The regular season is fun, but the postseason is where legacies are made. Just look at all the great players throughout NBA history who were stars in the regular season. They put up great numbers, they led their teams to impressive wins, yada yada yada, but you get to the playoffs and they have a bad series or even a bad game that causes them to lose a series, and all of a sudden, what are they? What do we remember them as? They're chokers, they're underperformers, they're guys who weren't really that good. Look at someone like Dirk Nowitzki. This man was seen as a choker, a bum, he was a soft European player who couldn't get it done, and then 2011 came along, and all of a sudden he is one of the greatest power forwards of all time. The greatest European player, until Giannis passes him, of all time. That is what a great postseason run can do for you, and that is what I want to talk about today. These are, in my opinion, the 5 players who have the most to gain or lose from this year's NBA playoffs. Starting this list off, let's talk about the reigning Finals MVP, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and his insane championship run last season. In case you were not an NBA fan at the time, you're a very new fan to basketball. Giannis made the finals last year with a Milwaukee Bucks team that was good, but not absurdly stacked, not amazing. They beat the super team, undefeatable Brooklyn Nets along the way. They beat the Hawks in the conference finals, and then they beat the Suns after going down 0-2 in the NBA finals, largely due to Giannis's dominance. He had an insane Game 6 performance with 50 points. 50 points in a finals game. Hasn't been done for like 50 years, 60 years, something insane. And Giannis did that to win the championship. This defined the legacy that we have for him right now. He has a championship. No one can take that away from him. But haters sure will try, and people will play the injury card. The injury card's freaking annoying to hear in the playoffs, but it does have truth to it, even if you disagree with the context, or the context around the title it creates, that is. The truth is, yeah, Giannis beat the Brooklyn Nets, who were very injured, and they still went to 7 games and an overtime. It's very, very probable that if the Nets were healthy, even slightly more healthy than they were, they would have won the series. Likewise, in the finals, the Phoenix Suns were injured. Booker hurt his hamstring during the series, Chris Paul was dealing with a nagging injury like he always is, and the Bucks still won in 6 games nevertheless, but you can say that the Suns only made the finals because of injuries in the West, and they weren't even that good of a team themselves. So there are a lot of criticisms people will throw, fair or unfair, against Giannis and against his title run. So another championship this season would truly solidify his legacy as an all-time power forward, as an all-time NBA great. Many people already have him within their top 25, but if he was to win another championship this season through a much healthier NBA, you wouldn't really be able to argue that he's a top 25 player of all time. He's probably a top 20 player of all time at that point, if we're being realistic. I don't know, maybe I'm taking things too far, but Giannis with another championship would be huge. At the same time, if he was to lose, probably not going to get upset by the Bulls. The series is currently tied 1-1. Can't see a way the Bucks lose that, but even if they lose in the second round to the Celtics or the Nets, or they lose in the conference finals to the Sixers or the Heat, it would only prove the doubters right in their minds that Giannis only won because of injuries and that their team couldn't really get it done. They didn't have a legit championship. So this is a very important title run for Giannis. It could do a whole lot for his legacy if he wins, and it could really hurt it if he loses. Next up, we have 2 players who are in a very similar situation here, and that is Chris Paul and James Harden. Let's start with Chris Paul, who did take his team to the NBA Finals last season as one of their 2 star players. This year, he has taken a little more of a backseat to Devin Booker, but nevertheless, he is still the clear second best player on this team, a clear star for this team, and someone who has not won a championship after a very long and very iffy career. Chris Paul's playoff career has been filled with injuries. He's had a few chokes in there, not as many as the haters would make you think, but a few chokes in there, a few underperformances. And last season in the finals, once again, you can point to Chris Paul underperforming as part of the reason the Suns lost. Yes, he was hurt, but ultimately, when you've got a player who's hurt this often, you can't keep using the injury excuse. At some point, you just have to be like, well, I guess he's just someone who's hurt all the time. So a title for Chris Paul, even at this old age, even when he is no longer the number one guy, would do a whole lot to solidify his legacy. I don't think losing this year would change too much for him unless he specifically played like really bad, even though the rest of the team played really well. But a championship for Chris Paul could really be the difference between him being a point guard seen on the same tier by some clowns as a guy like Jason Kidd or Russell Westbrook, and him being seen as a tier on the same level of a guy like Isaiah Thomas or Jerry West or Oscar Robertson. A championship really can do that much for one player's legacy, even if they are past their prime and no longer the best player on their team. Similarly, James Harden has been a guy who is known as a playoff choker. With Chris Paul, you can point to a lot of the times that he quote-unquote choked, and you can be like, look, he was hurt. It wasn't his fault. The man either wasn't in the series, or his teammates played like garbage, or he, was playing through some kind of crappy injury. James Harden just tends to play like crap in the playoffs. The 2018 meltdown in Game 6 and Game 7, one of the biggest playoff chokes in NBA history. He's had quite a few other ones in there too, but that is the one that comes to everyone's mind. You know it. It's probably the first thing you think about when you think about James Harden, unless you think about him on the free throw line. But, like Dirk Nowitzki, this could all change with the title. Even as the number 2 option, the Sixers cannot win this series without James Harden playing some very good basketball. And if he can do that, if he can take the Sixers to a championship, or at the very least, their first NBA Finals appearance in 2001, and James's first NBA Finals appearance since he was a bench player on the Thunder in 2012, that would be massive. Like, I really can't overstate how impactful a title can be for a player, even someone like James, who's no longer the best player on the team. Those labels of being a choker, an underperformer, etc. would all be wiped away by this championship. Again, just look at Dirk Nowitzki. All of it goes away with a single title run. And this isn't for some small franchise either. This is for the Philadelphia 76ers. Could you imagine the storylines, the legendary storyline being told about this title for years and years to come? Ben Simmons, maybe the most hated player in Sixers history, is finally traded, and in return we get James Harden, and we immediately win a championship? It would be absolutely insane. The world, the NBA fan base, which a large part of it is Sixers fans, they're one of the biggest fan bases out there, would never be able to forget that James Harden won a title. It would be huge for his legacy. And not just him. It wouldn't just be Harden, it would also be Joel Embiid's first title. Not only would it be his first title, it wouldn't even be his first finals appearance. This would be Joel Embiid's first time making it past the second round of the playoffs. And this is another guy who, fairly or unfairly, and I think it's very unfairly, I've made a whole video on why it's unfair, is viewed as a playoff underperformer. Despite the fact that he played very well in the last 2 postseasons, he is viewed as a career playoff choker because he has not been able to make the Eastern Conference Finals, and certainly has not made the NBA Finals or won a title. This is a dude who gets a lot of flack for a lot of reasons. People don't like his personality, they don't like how he draws free throws, they don't like this or that or the other with him. They find a million reasons to have things against Joel Embiid and to criticize his legacy. But if you get an NBA title in the hands of Joel Embiid, you get him that championship trophy, first of all, I don't think that it is an exaggeration to immediately mark him as the greatest Sixer in NBA history. And that is not, that's not even my personal opinion. Like, that's not, based on what he accomplished. That is just what the public perception would be around Joel Embiid. Because when you look at the other Sixers greats, Wilt Chamberlain, only there for a few years. Dr. J had his prime in the ABA in a whole different league, and then did not play for the Sixers his entire career. Moses Malone was only there for a few years. Charles Barkley was only there for a few years. Allen Iverson was there throughout his prime, but he never won a title. Neither did Barkley either, by the way. So all these Sixers greats have reason to hold them back. But Joel Embiid, assuming he stays in Philly, which I don't know why he wouldn't. He seems like someone who really loves the city. He really loves the fan base. He loves being here. He stayed through the process. He is the process. One of the most iconic things in basketball history now, because, and not iconic for a good reason, everyone hated the process. But he took the nickname as his moniker. He says that he loves the city. He loves the fan base. And this fan base will revere him for it forever. He becomes arguably the greatest player in one of the greatest basketball cities in the world. After Boston and the Lakers, I'd say Chicago and the Spurs are the only two other cities who have a real case to have a better basketball history than Philadelphia. They really are. Philly is an iconic city in basketball, and for Embiid to solidify himself as the greatest player of that franchise, absolutely insane. It does monumental things for his legacy. All the injury woes, the underperformance woes, they go out the window because he stuck with his team and he won them a championship. It would be crazy for Joel Embiid to lead the Sixers to a title this season. Finally, we come to Steph Curry, the last player I have on this list. And while Steph Curry has, in the eyes of many, accomplished everything anyone could ask of him. He's won 3 titles, he's got 2 MVPs, he led his team to the greatest regular season of all time. He's done a whole lot, and if you believe that Steph Curry has nothing else to prove, I'm not going to say that you are wrong for that. However, it should be noted that many people do not agree with you. In the eyes of many, Steph Curry's titles all have a massive asterisk next to them and do not count. And I know that you can put an asterisk next to literally any NBA championship. It happens every single season. But the 3 next to Curry's are all pretty big, to be fair. He won 2 of them as arguably not even the best player on his team. He did not win Finals MVP. And the other one he won against a crippled team who still pushed them to 6 games, despite it literally just being LeBron James and role players against the 67-win Warriors team. And Steph Curry himself did not play very well in that series. He wasn't awful. He probably deserved the Finals MVP. But nevertheless, he played down to his regular season standards. So for many people, it is still believed that Curry needs to prove he can get it done in the playoffs. He needs to make it all the way through as the clear best player, and he needs to lead his team to another championship. And not only does this solidify Curry's legacy as someone who really could get it done the whole time, he led his team, it takes away all the doubts, but also Curry is, for me, already the 12th greatest player of all time. That is where I rank him on my all-time list. He is just on the verge of that top 10, and I believe he's in that spot for many people. If Curry was to win another championship, if he was to lead the Warriors to the title this year, we're talking about a Steph Curry who's probably in the top 10 of all time for most people. He's probably there. Now, I don't know how high he really goes. I don't know if he's really passing Magic for greatest point guard. But wherever another title puts him, it would be huge for Steph Curry's legacy. Top 10 player of all time is, it's 10 players. Of all the players in NBA history, being one of the 10 greatest ever is something beyond incredible. And Steph Curry has a real chance to do that with a championship this season. So those are my 5 players with the most to gain or to lose in this postseason. Giannis, Embiid, Harden, Chris Paul, and Steph Curry. Thank you all for watching, and if you think that there is someone who has a better case than any of these 5, please let me know in the comments, and tell me who you think is going to win the NBA championship.